Good morning and Happy New Year to everybody. This is either the last poetry reading of 2022 or probably the first poetry reading you hear in 2023. So perhaps I should also say Happy New Year again. There have been a lot of poets ruminating about New Year over many years, and I picked just a few that I thought told the story well in one way or another. In the background, you might be able to hear some background music that I'm playing on my Alexa speaker, and I thought it was good background music, so I'm leaving it on. I'm not turning it off. The first poem we're going to hear today is by a 19th century poet called Walter Savage Landor, and it's called Mild is the Parting Year. Let's find it here. Mild is the parting year, and sweet the odor of the falling spray. Life passes on more rudely fleet, and balmless is its closing day. I wait its close, I court its gloom, but mourn that never must there fall, or on my breast or on my tomb, the tear that would have soothed it all. We don't know whose tear it is he's speaking of, but his middle name, Savage, really kind of described his personality much more than this mild poem does. He wrote Latin better than he did English, and some of his poems in English were first written in Latin and then translated by him, I suppose. He may have single-handedly given the English people a bad reputation while he was living, which he did for half his life, in Italy, and where he yelled at the help and was disruptive in a lot of ways in his personal life. He was married 4 times, pretty rare in the 19th century, each time to girls in their teens. His family had a lot of money, and I'm sure that helped him in many ways. Let's see if we can find the next poem here. Here it is. I'm a little disorganized this morning, but I think you can forgive me, this being January 1st. You know, that's why New Year's is always sort of characterized by a baby in diapers. That's kind of how I feel this morning, running around the house and trying to get this program finished. But I love every minute of it, of course, as you probably know. The next poem is called To the New Year by W.S. Merwin, a well-known U.S. poet. With what stillness at last you appear in the valley, your first sunlight reaching down to touch the tips of a few high leaves that do not stir as though they had not noticed and did not know you at all. Then the voice of a dove calls from far away in itself to the hush of the morning. So this is the sound of you, here and now, whether or not anyone hears it. This is where we have come with our age, our knowledge such as it is, and our hopes such as they are, invisible before us, untouched, and still possible. I think that's a wonderful poem. I really do, and well worth your attention. If you can look it up and read it again, it would be worthwhile. Merwin was born in 1927 and spent much of his early life in Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's not far from where I am now. Merwin was appointed U.S. Poet Laureate in 2010. In addition to his poetry, he was considered to be an environmental activist. I don't know exactly what he did, mostly because he talked about it a lot, I guess. He died in 2015, and I think most of us who love poetry are very glad to have known him and to have read his work. Now then, let's move on to a more famous poet of the 20th century at least, and on into the 21st century. His name is Richard Wilbur. Richard Wilbur died in 2017, but he had a long, long career, and I won't go into that until I've had a chance to read his poem called Year's End. Now winter downs the dying of the year, and night is all a settlement of snow. From the soft street the rooms of houses show a gathered light, a shapen atmosphere, like frozen over lakes whose ice is thin and still allows some stirring down within. I've known the wind by water banks to shake the late leaves down, which frozen where they fell and held in ice as dancers in a spell, fluttered all winter long into a lake, graved in the dark in gestures of descent. They seemed their own most perfect monument. There was perfection in the death of ferns, which laid their fragile cheeks against the stone a million years. Great mammoths overthrown composedly have made their long sojourns, like palaces of patience, in the gray and changeless lands of ice. And at Pompeii the little dog lay curled and did not rise, but slept the deeper as the ashes rose and found the people incomplete, and froze the random hands, the loose, unready eyes of men, expecting yet another sun to do the shapely thing they had not done. These sudden ends of time must give us pause. We fray into the future, rarely wrought save in the tapestries of afterthought. More time, barrages of applause come muffled from a burning, buried radio. The New Year bells are wrangling with the snow. That was a very good poem by a very good poet. And you can find that poem in the collected poems of Richard Wilbur, 1943 to 2004. Houghton Mifflin Harcourt published that book, and it would be well worth looking into for this and more poems by Richard Wilbur. He was really one of the most successful poets of the 20th century. Why is it I can't say poet when I want to? I always say poem. And I can't say poem. I always say poet. Somebody please explain that to me. Richard Wilbur was the second poet laureate of the United States. The first one, I think, was I know it. I'll come back to it later. Richard Wilbur was educated at Amherst And shortly thereafter, he went into the army as a soldier in World War II. But his poetry never really reflected his military experience. And his poetry was rather intellectual, but never dull. He won 2 Pulitzer Prizes over his long life. He was a professor of poetry at Wesleyan College and later a poet in residence at Smith. He wrote a number of books for young children among his many accomplishments, and altogether was one of our most prolific poets. One of my New Year's resolutions is to read more of Richard Wilbur's work. I've read some of it over the years, but I haven't gotten into it like I really feel I should. What else do we do after New Year's? The 12 days of Christmas will soon be over, and Naomi Shihab has the answer in a poem called Burning the Old Year. Here it is. I have these things scattered all over the place. Burning the Old Year by Naomi Shihab. Letters swallow themselves in seconds, notes friends tied to the doorknob, transparent scarlet paper sizzle like moth wings, marry the air. So much of any year is flammable. Lists of vegetables, partial poems, orange swirling flame of days so little as a stone. Where there was something and suddenly isn't, an absence of shouts celebrates, leaves a space. I begin again with the smallest numbers. Quick dance, shuffle of losses and leaves. Only the things I didn't do crackle after the blazing dies. I think she speaks for many of us there when she describes burning the old year. Well, I guess we could burn bad memories of the previous year, and if we can, we should, and then keep the good ones. But there are so many good memories from this past year, and it's up to each one of us to try to remember those and not remember the bad stuff. Burn it up like Naomi Shihab has done. Let's keep the good memories. That's it for the 1st of January, 2023. Bye now.